Hey friends, and welcome back to another episode of Web3 Academy. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to turn your audience into a tokenized community, but this episode is a little bit different. This is actually a recording of a presentation that I did at the Epic Web3 Summit. So this was a digital conference for creators, for businesses, for entrepreneurs. So perfect because that's exactly who all of you are, those that listen to the Web3 Academy podcast. And I presented there and basically told the story of how we grew our audience this year and we tokenized that audience, turned them into a DAO, and talked about just many other ways that you could do it, not just through our story. We also talked through the Bankless DAO story and how that happened since I was a part of that. And just talked about the ins and outs of why you would want to tokenize your audience and what benefits that brings to your business and to your audience themselves. And then just talked about ways in which you can do it and sort of like what that journey is like, and just kind of gave my experience. So really interesting presentation. There was about 25 minutes of teaching, and then I did a Q&A at the end for those that were listening in live at the conference. So some great questions on how to monetize your audience in your community and many different discussions there. And so I wanted to share that with you. And so that's really what this episode is going to be, is literally just my recording from this presentation. Before we get into that, I just wanted to wish you all a happy new year. I know it's coming up. I think this goes out on the 30th. So it's coming up very soon. Exciting time. 2022 was absolutely amazing. I hope you all had an amazing holidays and took some time off to spend some time with family in that. And looking forward to a big 2023 in the Web3 space. It's going to be very exciting. And I hope to go along that journey of 2023 with all of you. So thanks again for listening. I really appreciate all of you. And I'm looking forward to learning and growing with all of you over the new year. So before we get into this presentation, let's take a quick second to hear from our sponsors. Otherwise, Happy New Year's, everyone, and enjoy this episode. The future of social media is here, and that future lives in Web3 on top of Lens protocol. Web2 social platforms are broken and ripe for disruption. You see, the epicenter of social media is the creators, and yet they are the most neglected. Web2 platforms like Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram are all essentially robbing creators of their worth. Creators are a new type of entrepreneur, forming new types of businesses. Yet with Web2 platforms, creators don't own their content or their profiles, and that's their product and business. Instead, they are tied to the platforms they choose to create on. Well, just like how crypto is freeing us from banks, Web3 is freeing us from these centralized platforms. On Lens protocol, creators own their content, own their profile, and even their social graph and followers in the form of NFTs. This allows you to move freely from one social application to another with your content, profile, and followers moving along with you. Lens protocol enables self-sovereignty for your social graph and interoperability across the internet. At Web3 Academy, we believe this is the future of social, and that's why we've partnered with Lens to ensure that the path of social media is heading in the right direction. Visit lens.xyz to learn more today.
Unlock Protocol is the NFT membership protocol for Web3. Content subscriptions, community access, event tickets are all forms of memberships, one of the most common business models for creators and entrepreneurs today. Building an NFT membership opens many new possibilities for your members. Everything from tailored multi-platform experiences to the ability to sell an unfinished subscription on secondary markets. These are things just not possible in Web 2. However, in order for this business model to work, creators need NFTs which are time-bound or have built-in recurring payments. Unlock Protocol does this for your NFTs. Better yet, with a few simple steps, you can create your own NFT contract without code. What WordPress has done for websites, Unlock Protocol is doing for membership NFTs. If you're an NFT creator, you can't rely on royalties as they are likely going to zero. You need recurring revenue. You need Unlock. At Web3 Academy, we believe NFT memberships are the future of business and community. And that's why we decided to build on Unlock. Learn more at unlock-protocol.com.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining today. And we're going to talk about turning your audience into a tokenized community. And we'll do that through telling a little bit of story about our experience. So she mentioned I run Impact Digital Marketing. I also run a media platform called Web3 Academy. And our audience tokenized themselves organically out of nowhere, and not out of nowhere, but it was a very interesting scenario. And so we're going to share that and then just talk about tokenizing in general, because we've had the experience with our platform in our audience, but we've also done this to some of our clients as well. Tokenizing communities has been, one of the big unlocks, I guess, of the latest bull run, 2020, 2021, whether that be with NFTs or social tokens. I think a lot of it, though, was not actually tokenizing communities. We were just creating tokens and a bunch of people were speculating on them. And I don't think there was real community there. And so we're going to just talk about how we can do this in a way that is actually beneficial to an existing business, potentially to a new business, and how you do it so that you create actual strong connections and you can turn this into something much bigger than I think what we saw in the PFP 10,000 craze over the last couple of years. So just a quick background of who I am a little bit further. So co-founder of Impact Digital Marketing. Impact Digital Marketing is a growth marketing agency, which works with many of the top crypto and Web3 media platforms in the space. So some of the logos are below, like Bankless, Real Vision, FinTech Blueprint, and a host of others. So you may have heard of some of them, or you may read some of them or listen to some of them. From that, we spawned out our own media platform, which is a newsletter and podcast called Web3 Academy, where we essentially teach businesses, creators, and entrepreneurs how to use Web3 in their business, which is a little bit about what we're going to do today in terms of tokenizing communities. I've been in the creator economy for 10 years, building businesses there, and also in crypto and Web3 since 2019. So from the logos you see there, Bankless actually had this scenario happen to them as well. They tokenized their audience into a tokenized community. And then Web3 Academy, we have done this as well. So we have a couple of different examples to share along our journey here as we discuss this. I'll try to keep it rather short so we can do some Q&A at the end, because I think that's a much better way to discuss this and hopefully answer a bunch of questions. So let's dive into this a little bit further. So we'll start here. Why would you want to tokenize your community? And the clear answer is, well, it turns a passive audience into an active community. If you're running a business in 2022, you probably have some sort of audience. And that audience could be on Twitter, maybe it's podcast listeners, a newsletter, could just be your customers, right? It could be an email list. But many of us are speaking to people online, and that you can see as an audience. Now, previous to Web3, that audience typically stays as just a passive audience that's consuming your content or your products or your services. What Web3 enables us to do with tokens is turn that audience into an active community that can actually help you build products. And if you look at the picture on the right, we see kind of the old way here is build a product and then build a community. And now with Web3, what we're seeing is build a community and then you build products based on what that community needs, or that community may just help you build them themselves. And the reason is because tokenizing aligns incentives with you. Maybe that's you as the entrepreneur, as the creator, as the business, and the community themselves. And so if we can align incentives, some amazing things can happen. It makes your community feel like, or actually become, depending on how you set up your tokens, an owner. And so maybe they become an owner of your business. Probably that's a little bit too far, but they could. Maybe they become an owner of your community themselves, or a specific product that you're building, or a service. It depends on, again, what it is that you're actually tokenizing. It allows you to tap into the skills and experiences of your community members. So this is one of the really cool unlocks, I think, of Web3 when you tokenize a community, is that your audience or your customer base, whatever that is, has tons of different skills. They may be marketing people, they may be designers, they may be developers, they may be salespeople, who knows what they may be. And previous to Web3, you couldn't really tap into that. You couldn't really get them, other than word of mouth, to help grow your product, your service, whatever that is. You couldn't really get them to go out and help you build or help you grow. Now, when you share ownership, and as a result of that, you can share governance, you can share revenues, you can share whatever, you can tap into those skills and basically build yourself a little army of people who can help you progress, or help your mission progress, or help your community progress. And that is really, really cool unlock, I think. Outside of just like helping you or helping to, activate people to build something else, it also just creates better retention and stickiness factor in your business. Now, this is as a result of building community, not necessarily the token, but this idea of owning something also adds to that effect. And if you look at the picture on the right there, we have audience, which is sort of these one connections from one person. That could be you, the creator, the entrepreneur, the business, to one. But if you see community, you start to see this interlocking of connections. And so community really creates these like stronger networks, these stronger connections, which if you think of as a business, it keeps people around your business more. And some of the biggest companies in the world all focus around community, or focus around building cults is another word that you can use. We kind of have a negative perception of what cult means, but it's actually technically a good thing. You think of Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world. I mean, there's no bigger cult, I think, than people who use Apple products. And that's all about building community. So community is so important for a business. And the final one here is you can gamify your community to improve engagement, to improve retention. And again, you can do that through tokenized incentives as well. So lots of reasons of why you might want to tokenize a community. And again, this just depends on what kind of business you are. If you're a creator, such as myself, who has a newsletter and podcast, maybe you tokenize because your community is going to help you build products. If you're a business like a Nike or Adidas, maybe you tokenize to create better experiences for your audience, for your customers, or to get to know them better. So lots of different ways that you can do it here. The way that you want to start tokenizing community is by first actually growing a community. And the easiest way to do that is by growing an audience. And I say this, and this may seem obvious, but what I saw, and we had so many people reach out over the last year who wanted to launch a 10,000 collection of NFTs on snowboarding or on whatever niche it was, but they had no audience and they had no community yet. And I was like, well, why are we starting with a token? What's the purpose? Who's going to even take this token? And it was all about trying to sell these NFTs. Usually you can also do it with social tokens or fungible tokens, but it was a lot of like, let's do whitelists and let's get a bunch of, high profile, influencers on Twitter to push out whitelists or push out spots for this NFT. And again, that's not community. It's just a bunch of people buying these random speculative tokens. And it's not really accomplishing much when you get down to it, because once you tokenize, you got to do something with that community. You got to build something, or you got to create an experience. And if it's a bunch of speculators and traders, well, that community is not going to go anywhere. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So the best way, and what we decided was, hey, let's just start by growing an audience. And so how do you do that? Well, thankfully in 2022, it's actually fairly, I don't want to say easy, but it's essentially free. And we have some amazing platforms that enable us to happen. And so really the idea here is find a niche. Our niche, for example, at Web3 Academy was creators, entrepreneurs, and businesses trying to understand how to use Web3. It was our niche, and just start creating content in that niche, right? And this is the playbook for all businesses. This has nothing to do with Web3. This is just how you start to build businesses in the real world regardless. And right now, currently, the best forms of content are a newsletter, a podcast, and shorts. Now, why newsletter and podcast? Because long form content is great to educate, to inform, and it also builds trust, right? When people can hear you, listen to you, or read your thoughts, your opinions in detail, it builds some serious trust. And that's a good starting point to eventually merge into building a community. Shorts, why are those a big deal? Well, because they grab attention, they show your face, and so they build trust. And you can also put them across many platforms. So most of our clients are all doing this, almost all of them. And because they can go on TikTok, they can go on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube shorts, they can go on Twitter, they can go on LinkedIn. So they literally can go everywhere. And so it's a very great multi-purpose piece of content that grabs attention of whoever is in your niche in whatever it is you're talking about. And again, this doesn't have to be Web3 related. It can really be any topic. And that's how you start. And so you can see us here. We're almost at 10,000 Twitter followers. And then we have our podcast that's just been growing just by, again, putting out content and finding other people around the internet who are interested in the things that we are talking about. And again, no token launch at this point. This is just organic growth of people who are just really interested. That's the whole point. The next step here is then you want to actually transition that audience into a community. And you'd want to do this again before a token. The token does not need to exist at this point, right? So once you build an audience, now you have the attention of a group of individuals who are interested in the same niche as you, think similarly to you, and have shown interest in what you're creating. And that's an amazing opportunity. And we'll talk about why that is. But that opportunity allows you to start to create products or start to create events or start to create experiences, whatever that is you want to do. When you find a group of people who are all interested in the same stuff, now you can do that together. And that's a big opportunity. And so the next step here is once you have that audience, and it doesn't have to be a big audience. It doesn't need to be 10,000 Twitter followers. It can be much smaller. And in fact, as you'll see in the end, starting small is actually much better here when you're trying to build a real community online. And so the recommendation here is invite your audience into a community platform to discuss whatever it is that you're talking about online, and allow them to do this in kind of a more private and intimate setting. Discord, of course, is the most popular platform right now in Web3. So this is where most people use it. It does have the most features. So probably my recommendation, it's what we use as well. But Slack can also work, Telegram, there's a bunch of different platforms out there. The idea here really is just to create a learning experience amongst individuals, right? So an audience, and just to separate the difference here, an audience is when one person speaks to many, kind of like what we're doing right now. But a community is when that many, they can speak to each other or they can also speak to you. And that's when real connections get formed and some amazing ideas can kind of form out of that, which is really, really exciting. And so you use this platform to learn about those people, to learn about their problems, about their needs, and you can start to discuss what can be built. And so this is a screenshot here of our community. What we did is we just invited our podcast listeners, our newsletter subscribers to join into a Discord. And we said, we don't really know what we're going to do in here, but we want to talk more about Web3. We want to dive deeper into this and start to uncover whatever we can about building businesses in Web3. So we had, a few hundred people join in. We started doing weekly calls. There was just chats going frequently in there. And there wasn't a whole lot of structure, but it was the consistency in the calls that kept bringing everyone together. And we were able to ask questions to our audience and start to understand them and their needs. And as a result, a community started to form, and we started to realize other products or things that we could build. And not even just us, but the community started to realize that together. And so it was an idea that they could start building things even without us at Web3 Academy. And so again, before you launch a token to your community, to your audience, the key thing here in community is determining a plan. And that plan could be a mission, a product, an event. It can be anything. But this is really what communities form around, which is a goal or a mission. And they can form around learning, right? That's what Web3 Academy is. They can form around having fun, right? Like games. They can form around building something, creating something, whatever that is. It's something that they can all do together and sort of achieve something. That's really what communities are looking for. And so it's really important to get clear on what that is and who's interested in supporting or being involved in that community. And when we think about what happens with this community or what they can do, they can help you build or create your own products. They can go and build their own products aside from you. Maybe they just enjoy continuing to build community because it's a place to learn or a place to have fun. They may want to host events, meetups, masterminds, etc. So there's lots of opportunities of what this community can actually do. And if we look on the right here, these are actually two products that are being built from our community. One is, if you look at the bottom one here, Web3 Academy Pro, this is a premium newsletter that we've created, which is like on-chain analysis to look at which businesses, business models, and concepts in Web3 are winning. And we didn't know how to do on-chain analysis. I just knew that this was something that was needed and we wanted to launch. Well, the community said, hey, we can help you build that, right? So this is what they did. We had a bunch of people who learned how to do this, and we had some writers and a bunch of people band around and help us create this product out of nowhere. It was really cool. The other one up here is called Web3pedia, and it's basically a way to discover which tools, Web3 tools, are good, which ones are bad, and get some reviews and things on them so you can kind of find whatever you're building in the space, which tools are available to you across different blockchains, et cetera. And this came out of a need that everyone was like, I want to build X business, but I don't know what tools to use. And the community said, well, why don't we all just create it together for the broader Web3 community? So two different products in two different ways that sort of came out of this idea. Now, how could we manage that? How could we govern that? How could people get paid? How could we structure that? Well, that's where the token comes from, right? So that's why you tokenize the community. And if we think about why we do that, it's one, to share revenues with those who contribute. So in our instance with Web3 Academy Pro, those who help build that product, they get a certain amount of tokens and we can share revenues that come in with those individuals, okay? But it can also have nothing to do with sharing revenues. It could be giving ownership or equity over the potential of the community and what it creates. And that's another way that Web3 Academy DAO did it as well. And so again, if you have a community, you're going to build things, you're going to create events, there's value that can come from that. And we don't know what that value is, but that's what makes a token so interesting, is that if value ever does come to that, now you can stamp who was a part of it, and you can actually easily program in who's going to get revenues from that, who's going to get equity from that, and you can then generate some wealth from that, which is really cool. It may also just be around governance and voting rights, right, to certain members or early adopters. If you think about many platforms that we use, even today, think Twitter. We all use Twitter in Web3. If you had the ability to vote on where Twitter was going to go, what new features they were going to launch, you'd probably like that, right? And so there's no equity there. There is no value from that. But to you as a Twitter user, or maybe you run your business on Twitter, there is value to that to you. And so that's another idea of what tokens can do for you and for your community. The other thing is just tracking who was a part of the community from the beginning, right? If you have people who were core contributors that, maybe the first person to attend a meeting, it's really cool to be able to come back years later and say, hey, I was number 1 there, or I was number 10, right? So it's just a great tracking feature as well. And finally, organization, structure, and access. So when you think about communities can get quite large. They can be very hectic. And we'll talk about that in a second because they actually generally do in the very beginning. And what tokens can do, and this can be via NFTs or through social tokens again, it can allow for some structure to show hierarchy. It can show access to certain channels inside of Discord, right? It can differentiate between the core people, the ones that were there first, or the ones that came later on, right? So depending on the token you give, they can have different access. And so if we look at the picture here, this is just a way that we distributed tokens. It's called a doer token. These are valueless tokens, by the way. We really wanted to get away from any of the speculation that happens in Web3. And so it was less about the value creation right off the bat and more about voting and structure and governance and some sort of ownership in the future is the way that we all distributed it. And so again, you can see that there was a core team. So those individuals got a certain amount of tokens. Then we had a certain amount that stays in the treasury and a certain amount that gets distributed to those who are contributing within in this instance, we call it a DAO. Really, any tokenized community is essentially a DAO, but it just depends on how you want to call it. But so that's kind of why you would do it and how we set it up as well. And so when you go to tokenize a community, what happens? I've seen this happen firsthand twice, one with Bankless DAO, one with Web3 Academy DAO. And the clear answer here is absolute mayhem, but it's some beautiful magic. And the reason I say that is imagine hundreds to thousands of people trying to organize into essentially what's a business all in one moment. And it might not be an actual business. You might not be building product, but whatever it is you're doing, it's a lot of people who are going to try to get organized to do something and accomplish something together. And so this is also why if you launch a 10,000 NFT collection to people who are not yet, a real community, they don't know each other because you did it all through, whitelists and influencer marketing and all that. Good luck getting organized because that is going to be absolute mayhem. I think most people underestimate how hard it is to build something with many strangers from around the world. It's the opposite of how a startup works. A startup is typically, hey, it's me. I got an idea. I'm going to start building it. When I'm ready, because I need a little bit of help, I hire a next person and someone who's really into it and really specialized. And we start working together and we get on the same page. And then we go to the next one. This is the complete opposite. Now, it's a wonderful thing. And some amazing opportunities can come from it. We've already seen that happen with many DAOs across the industry. But I think people need to wrap their head around what this really means to bring hundreds to thousands of people all together at one time. So Bankless at the time had about 50,000 newsletter subscribers, hundreds of thousands of podcast listeners. And the way that they did it is they just airdropped a token, and they would kind of regret the way they did this, but it is what it is. It was a great learning experience. Is they just airdropped about, I think it was to 5,000 or so, 5,000 people all received tokens to join this DAO all at once. And so literally one day, no one even knew that this was going to be a thing. They just airdropped to all their paid subscribers. So it was a more committed group of individuals, but we just dropped the tokens to them all. Everyone joined in a Discord and we said, all right, what are we going to do here? And it was pure mayhem. And it took months to get organized, to separate into groups, to get structured, to get the leaders and figure out who they were, to get roles in place, and to start building. Now, it started working. We started generating revenue, launching different things. There's now a consulting arm. There's courses. So much was created from it. And that's the magic, right? When people own something and they feel that they have equity in something and we're going to create something together, some amazing experience happens. Some really cool connections between people happen, even though you've never met them or even seen their face. But it's all because they felt that ownership, right? That responsibility when you own something. If you think about the difference between when you own a home, how you treat that home versus when you're in a hotel or in an Airbnb. It's a very big difference there in how you're going to react and how you're going to treat those spaces. And that's what you see when you start to tokenize your community versus having it not tokenized. So in a Bankless DAO, I would say it was a great success, but it was a lot of mayhem in the beginning. Web3 Academy, we learned from the Bankless story, and they said, keep it small. Whatever you do, go small. And so we did hundreds. Well, that was not small enough. We had the same scenario, mayhem. You don't know who can go where. You don't know who the leaders are. You don't know who's doing what. So we had a very similar experience. But again, it took a few months and all of a sudden we kind of got organized. We actually had to close it down, not let new people in, let people kind of leave to get rid of a lot of the noise. And once things settled down, it's now maybe about 30, 40 people, but we were able to get organized at that size. But that's when we really realized like this is the opposite of a startup. So very, very interesting what happens when you start to tokenize. A lot of mayhem, a lot of magic. So when I think about if you're ever looking to tokenize your community or your audience, because most people right now have audiences, not necessarily communities, I think some of the big takeaways that we learned from our experiences here was start small and get organized before growing. Don't do a big airdrop to 10,000 people. Jump actually had one of the cool. So Jump, Jeff Kaufman, who we've had on our podcast a lot and we speak to a lot, they've recently tokenized their community, and they've been building their community for about a year and a half now. It's a community for marketers, a lot of Fortune 500 marketers and executives that are trying to learn about Web3. But a year and a half of them just building community, learning together, growing together. Finally, they said, okay, we're going to create these products. We need to tokenize again so we can share revenues and all the kind of things I talked about. And what they did is instead of launching 1,000 tokens at once, they launched about 50, and they did a cohort base. And so they actually said, okay, we'll take 50 people. You guys can mint your tokens. It was very private. It was only to community members, not this like big public launch. And they could get their tokens, get in there, get structured, get the ball rolling. And then they did another cohort of another 50 and so on and so forth. And so they were slowly building up their treasury from doing this and slowly kind of building their structure and their organization inside of this tokenized community. And so they're still cohorting. I think they have about 400 that have been minted at this point, but it has been a really cool experience to watch and much cleaner, much more organized than anything that we saw previously. So I do recommend that. The next one is get clear on that mission or that plan. When people come in, people are going to be excited. And especially when that token first enters their wallet, they're going to want to work. And they're just like, they're excited to activate and to do things. And so you got to get clear on what that mission, that plan is first, so that people can start, building and start creating or start whatever that is right off the bat. If you're still in that phase of figuring that out, I would not launch at that point. Number 3, get to know the community to understand their strengths and their weaknesses and create clear roles and locate the leaders. The leaders is so key. Just like any business, you need people to lead departments, to lead projects, whatever that is. And it's the same in a DAO. It's the same in a tokenized community. You need to find those people. And what Jeff always talks about at Jump is he actually did a one-on-one call with every single person that joined his community, hundreds and hundreds of people over the last year and a half. And he said that was the most important, best thing that he ever did, because he could really build strong community that way and understand who can do what and get people in the right positions. And so that's really key when you're building such a large organization from scratch. So key point there. Next thing is build a strong and real community before you tokenize. I can't stress this one enough. My favorite quote is communities create tokens. Tokens don't create communities. And I think in 2020 and 2021, that was the playbook, was let's launch a token and hope a community comes from that. And when we look at floor prices now of most of those PFP projects, not many of them are actually working out. And so those that had strong community and built that community first, those are the ones that are really succeeding here. And I think that's really the future of tokenized communities, is community first, and then use token as a piece of utility, something to help you amplify your business, right? That's the key thing about these tokens here. And finally, 2 other things here, just as I wrap up. So one is be open and transparent about that token structure. So we did ours with a fungible token, which is, to be honest, a lot more complex. And so below that, I say NFTs over social tokens. And the reason is there's just so much that goes into the tokenomic structure of a fungible token and trying to get liquidity there and figure out how you're going to distribute that and make that maintain value over time. It's a very, very complex structure. And many companies across Web3 have not really figured this out. It's very difficult. I think the best one so far in terms of tokenomics would be ETH. But the devs there have been working on the tokenomics of ETH for 7 years now, and they still haven't nailed it, though they made some big changes over the last year with the merge. So it's very difficult. And so you want to be open, transparent, and actually figure out that structure with your community. That's actually what I recommend, is build that one with the community themselves. And then finally, I say NFTs over social tokens, because it's just so easy. One token to one person. You can make different NFTs mean different things and do different things. And so it makes tokenizing that community just so much easier. And so that's one of the things I wish we would have done with Web3 Academy DAO. And we still might, because you know what? Our token is still valueless. We haven't added liquidity. So we could always switch that at any point. But I think just NFTs is much easier, at least in the beginning. Social tokens can come in later for many different reasons, which I'm not going to get into right now. But I would recommend you start with the NFT route, mainly because we have a better playbook with NFTs than we do social tokens. So those would be my recommendations there around how you tokenize your community. I hope that was helpful to all of you, if any of you guys are looking to do that. And I would love to answer some questions here as well.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for that presentation. And so we have a question from the audience. Do you monetize your community?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends on what your community is. So there's a great picture. I wish I could show it right now, but where it breaks down community in three ways. So either the community is your product, the community buys your product, or the community builds your product, right? So it kind of depends on what that community is. In Web3 Academy DAO's example, the community was building the product. So we don't necessarily have to monetize that community because they're actually generating value by the products that they're creating. So they're monetizing through what they make. So that's an interesting way to do it. And the other ways you could monetize a community is through partnerships, sponsorships, right? So there's a lot of businesses that are going to want it. If your community is, focused on a niche about, I don't know, let's say us, Web3 Academy, focused on a niche about creators building in Web3, there's a lot of companies out there that have tools to enable creators. So they're probably going to want to say, hey, we want to get our brand and our tools in front of your community. That's a way you could monetize it. The other part of it actually is when you launch that NFT, I mean, we did ours in a free way. So we just airdropped valueless tokens. So there was no monetization, no building of a treasury. But if you launch an NFT that actually costs and you say, hey, to join this community, you need to, pay, I don't know, 0.1 ETH or whatever, you actually build a bit of a treasury there. And now you can start to use that to hire people or to do whatever you want with it. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. It depends on who your community is and what they are and what you're going to do with them. So it's a difficult one to answer clearly.
Yes, and I think it depends on what your actual like offer is. I know
Yeah.
for us, it's like our community, our co-creators, our supporters, and then we have actual customers because people book in
Right.
stays, and so it's a clear distinction. And so, but not all projects have that
And
clear distinction.
And to be honest, if you create a community of people who are going to help you build, for example, like we did, those are also our customers. They're actually our
Yes.
best customers, right? Because they see and speak with me every single day. And so anything I launch, they're like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. I want to buy that because we've created these strong connections, right? It's like when you launch a product, your family is probably going to be the first ones to buy it. Well, your community is going to be that as well. So they're kind of both.
And then tokenization allows for a reward and more reward versus transactional experience.
Exactly.
The next question we have is, do you monetize the Web3 Academy newsletter? And if yes, what proven methods could you recommend?
Yeah, it's a great question. So newsletters are probably one of the greatest business models, I think, right now. They're so scalable. And yes, we do monetize. There's a few ways you can do it. One is through sponsorships, right? So we just talked about that one, finding brands, products, services that want to get in front of your users or your readers, sorry. And so that's a great way to generate some revenue. And the other way is through a premium service. So, what we've done is we've created kind of a paywalled newsletter of some additional content that is very actionable. It's charts and a lot of like on-chain analysis. And so there's a great way to monetize there. And it's an easy transition, right? From free newsletter over to paid. And this is what almost all of our clients do. If you listen to Bankless, they have the same thing. And so definitely potential there as well. I think eventually those become NFT subscriptions, right? So the subscription model is probably the most popular business model right now on the internet. Everyone has it, from Apple to Amazon with Prime and Netflix, et cetera. And so a newsletter is essentially just that. Eventually those will become NFTs, I think, so that people can sell their subscriptions rather than just cancel them. So those are kind of the two main ways that you would monetize a newsletter.
Yes.
But there's
And then,
also, I'm just going to add one more thing. You can build products for your readers. And now you can also use it as a pool of potential customers in the future. So a lot of our clients are building products for those newsletter readers. And now you have a pool of people who are ready to go and buy that product right away. So it's also just a great way to build an audience.
absolutely. And I was just going to say, Unlock Protocol, they make easy integration to token gate your communities or your content, but they're also creating up systems so that you can still sell NFTs, but it still be like a subscription based pay if you haven't quite figured out the budgeting aspect of selling one
Yes.
NFT but then budgeting forever. So that's always a good protocol to look into.
Speaking of sponsors, Unlock Protocol is a sponsor of our newsletter. So that was very relevant. And yes, their product is absolutely amazing. And we use them as well.
I love Unlock. I've built some projects with them. And so the next question we've got is, what advice would you give yourself when you just started the community?
Ooh, I think the best advice for starting a community is do the non-scalable things first. For me, I'm a marketer. I'm a growth marketer. So I love scale, right? I'm like, okay, we're spending $1,000 on ads. Let's go spend, $100,000 on ads. I want to build automation. I want to do all these things that are scalable because that's just the way that I've always worked as a marketer. But as I've become a community builder, that stuff doesn't work. It's the complete opposite. It's what I said earlier of get on those one-on-one calls when they first enter your community, have those meetings, get to know those people. It's when you do those non-scalable things, it sets the foundation for the community. If you try to automate everything in community, the connections don't happen. And that's what community is all about. Community is not about more people and more reach. Like I always got people going, how do I get more people into my Discord, more people into my community? And I was like, they're like, we already have like 10 a day. How do I get more? And I'm like, 10 a day. Imagine trying to meet and connect with 10 people every single day. That's impossible. Like you don't need more people. You need to slow down and maybe get less people and really focus on building those connections. And then not just connections with you and those people, but then connecting those people together. Because the more those happen, again, that foundation of the community starts to build and becomes much stronger and starts to work without you. That's the key part of community is eventually you get to move out of it. And now they run events, build products and do things. And you don't have to be the center of it all the time. That's when you know your community is really starting to form. And that doesn't happen through automation.
And that kind of goes to what you were saying with what Bankless, the lesson learned there. It's like quality over quantity. And then as your community grows, you're able to support the quantity because the quality is already there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the last question we've got for you is how many people are on your team in the Web3 Academy?
It's a great question. It's actually quite small. So Web3 Academy was actually born out of our marketing agency. So the team that's on our marketing agency just helped us build it. Now we have a small team. There's 5 of us in there. We have a media person, so someone that handles all of our content. We have a social media person, the person that's actually creating the content and putting it out and scheduling it. We have a writer. And then we have Jay and I, who are the co-hosts that host the podcast and also do some of the writing. So we've kept it pretty small. But what's been great is our community has basically amplified that, right? So our community has now helped us. Every week we do like a roll up and we kind of look through all the news for the week and we share like a podcast on it. But who brings us that news? The community does. And so we don't need to hire someone for that because the community is like, we'll help you get that news and cultivate that news. And we're like, great. And now we have these other products that, again, we haven't had to hire a developer for because we have devs in our community. We haven't had to hire a designer for because we have designers in our community. And so they've been able to allow us to grow at such a fast rate and start to produce products that we weren't even ready to start making yet because we didn't have the team for it, but we don't need it now because our community is really, lifting us up and helping us. So it's helped us and allowed us to have such a small team.
Yeah. So it's like you've got your like core team and then your community is able to supplement it. So it's as if you actually have a large team without having to have all of the overhead of the large team because of how the community builds and supports itself. Cool.
Exactly.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Kyle, for your time and your wisdom. I really, really enjoyed your presentation. And just to wrap it up quickly, what would be just one parting piece of wisdom you want to give to people?
My parting piece of wisdom is to forget about a lot of what happened in 2020 and 2021 and ask a lot of questions about that and go, was that really the right way to do it? And instead look at what's possible in the future. A lot of what happened in that bull market was just speculation and traders and just things that didn't really work out. So I think be particular in what you do moving forward and look at what's being launched and happening now rather than what happened back then. Those were not the playbooks that we should use moving forward. Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.